Hello everybody, and welcome to Ancient Architects. Please subscribe now to get the latest ancient history news and independent research from around the world. A giant 3,500 to 4,000 year old barrow cemetery has been discovered in Wiltshire in England, and so far 10 Bronze Age burials have been excavated, as well as 3 piles of buried cremation ash. Of course, Wiltshire is already famous for its history, because it includes the Stonehenge Neolithic landscape, which is located around 8 miles north of the newly excavated site, which is on the outskirts of the suburban town of Harnham, near the city of Salisbury. Stonehenge had 3 phases of construction, with the final phase dated to between 2550 and 1600 BC, meaning the newly excavated barrows were made at the same time as this final stage, very much when the famous Henge monument was in use. Stonehenge Phase 3 could have had as many as 6 sub-phases of work, with new stones added, stones taken away, stones reshaped and new ring pits dug. By all accounts, this was a period of intense activity, and being buried so close to Stonehenge, you can't help but think that the people that were buried inside the barrows knew the stone circle very well. Wiltshire already has a large selection of Bronze Age barrows, many of which have been found within the World Heritage Site. But this part of Wiltshire, 8 miles away, close to the medieval city of Salisbury, is not well understood. So, what do we know about the new discovery? Well, it's somewhat of a chance find. The area had been earmarked for the building of 640 new homes, and before the builders go in, archaeologists from Cotswold Archaeology had the chance to excavate. Bronze Age round barrows are found all over England and can be easily identified as a round mound of earth that's surrounded by a ring ditch, from which the earth and stone for the mound was dug. But with centuries of cultivation, many barrows have been levelled and lost, and that's the case with these new discoveries. Although Google Earth has always shown that this region has a lot of history hiding below the surface. More on this at the end of the video. Barrows usually comprise a central burial chamber, a mound and surrounding ditch, and they can range in size from under 10 metres all the way up to 50 metres in diameter. Other earthworks are also often associated. There are also a number of varieties, including bell barrows that have a sizable central mound, disc barrows with a smaller central mound, and pond barrows that have a hollow in the centre. Some barrows contain just one burial, others have a sequence of burials, and sometimes there are multiple burials, people that have been laid to rest at the same time. The cemetery under investigation consists of 20 or more barrows, which spread from the very edge of Harnham on the Nadder Valley floor up to and across the adjacent chalk hillside on what is the northern edge of the landscape of Cranbourne Chase. They're generally arranged in small clusters, either in pairs or groups of 6, and so far only 5 have been excavated. At least 3 of the barrows are multi-phased, and 2 of them have been substantially enlarged.
Yo, Ninja Lifestyle. Yo, beautiful cake muscle. Yeah, man. Yeah. Sad, man. Sad that I bought a couple decks. I bought 2. But man, shipping to Canada was like super expensive. That's why I didn't make much sense. I mean, international, it was expensive. But nice snack, thanks, man.
The oval barrow also
It's a couple of sandwiches.
And these contain a selection of red deer antler, and these were used in ancient times as handpicks, or were sometimes attached to wooden handles to make pitchforks and rakes.
$60, yeah. I spent I don't know if I spent 60, but I spent quite a lot. I think I might have spent 60. 60 Canadian dollars maybe. Those look so good. Yo, thanks, man.
Including a possible sunken building, a waterhole with preserved timbers, Saxon pottery, iron knife blades and a possible piece of Roman pottery. We also find a late Iron Age cultivation terrace.
Yeah, the extra lettuce on top makes it better, much better quality.
And clear evidence of a late Bronze Age to Iron Age settlement made up of over
Thanks, man.
240 pits and post holes.
Eating stream.
The pits were used for rubbish, but some of them could have been dug to store grain. In another part of the site, more nearly
Yeah, I think some of the people that were watching are kind of upset they stopped playing GoldenEye, but I gotta get strong, gotta eat, I gotta be strong. We're coming back later tonight at it. I know people in England might be kind of pissed, but I need to get my reps in.
We know that this type of pottery was used by the early builders of Stonehenge, as well as Avebury and Durrington walls. Neolithic pit deposits often contain token amounts of broken and burnt material, the remains of feasts,
How was an interview?
exotic objects. In the new excavation site, as well as the grooveware pottery, experts have also found a microdenticulate, which is a small flint saw, as well as 3 oblique arrowheads. It's proving to be an area steeped in history, and when I was looking for this site on Google Earth, I could see there is a hell of a lot more still to find.
Thank you, Villani. Oh, wow.
Satellite photographs can reveal hidden archaeology
Hey.
below the surface. And although it's hard to say exactly what we're looking
Frankie
at,
Villani, cool.
using satellite photos from 2014, and it's clear there are many features below ground. We can see the barrows at the excavation site when it was still a working field, but if we move 900 metres to the south, we find this incredible area, and clear archaeological features are visible. Zoom out further and let your eyes pan across the landscape, and we can quickly identify features that cut across the modern layout of fields.
I think it's so cool that people submit their videos to you to criticize. It's hilarious. But I guess you did a pro part this time, sounds like.
Thank you very much for watching this news update from Ancient Architects. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel, please like the video, and please leave a comment below. Thank you very much. This news update from Ancient Architects. If you enjoyed the video,
Makes sense. Oh, I'm starving. Get this figured out. Yeah, buddy. Oh, nice, man. Hell yeah.
And independent research from around the world. In June 2020, it was announced that a
Nice, man.
large prehistoric site in Britain had been discovered, and it was located right next to Stonehenge. I've linked my video on this discovery in the description below, but recently there have been new developments that show that this feature, a ring of deep prehistoric pits, 1.2 miles wide, is beyond doubt a man-made feature of the landscape. Since this discovery, there were doubts about the origins of the pits, with some saying they were merely natural features, like sinkholes. So scientists have looked further into the discoveries, and tests have proved that these gaping pits, which align to form a kind of squash circle around Durrington walls, is a man-made feature of the sacred Stonehenge landscape. Some believe the pits are like a boundary, guiding people to the Durrington Walls site, one of the largest henge monuments in Britain, and also a site of feasting for the ancient people. Durrington Walls is located 1.9 miles northeast of Stonehenge on the Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire. So, why the doubt? Well, one archaeologist referred to the pits as blobs on the ground, and said that linking them to Stonehenge was entirely hypothetical. Another archaeologist said they were merely natural hollows. The professor who led the team that made the discovery, Vincent Gaffney at Bradford University, was shocked by the claims and recalls that one archaeologist also wanted a geologist on site to help recognise the natural features. In truth, two geologists had already looked at them. Part of this huge circular feature has not survived, but the arrangement is certainly on purpose. The ring of pits is 20 times larger than Stonehenge, and it shows that the early inhabitants of Great Britain had developed a way to count, tracking hundreds of paces to measure out the pits. The latest scientific work, which includes remote sensing technology, has looked at 9 of the pits identified, and experts have noted that they are all the same, which wouldn't be the case if they were natural. For example, sinkholes would all be different sizes. Instead, each pit is 10 metres across and 5 metres deep, and experts believe they were dug by the same people that created Stonehenge.
Wow, that's so cool.
Cutting-edge
These like pits to catch animals? Oh wow.
tests, or OSL for short, can date the last time sediment was exposed to daylight, and these tests on the pits prove beyond doubt that they were dug around 4,400 years ago. The new technology means that archaeologists don't just have to locate a piece of bone or charcoal to date a buried structure. Any radiocarbon dates can now be corroborated using OSL. Sediment analysis has also shown that it unfilled at a similar time. The evidence shows the pits were being used from the late Neolithic all the way through to the Middle Bronze Age, after which they were simply left as silt turf. This shows they were maintained for decades. The new work is the focus of a new TV documentary on the British Channel 5, titled Stonehenge: The New Revelations, which airs at 9 PM on December the 9th. Whilst many experts agree that Stonehenge was positioned in relation to the solstices, some speculate the boundary pits may have had cosmological
They're panicking.
significance. Others say they were simply built from the waste, although to me this seems unlikely.
Yeah, they're panicking. They're flustered.
I've looked at the idea that they are in fact sound resonators, but I suspect there is a far more basic explanation. At the time of their creation, Britain was a farming community, and I have long held the belief that henge and cursus monuments, structures we see across Neolithic Britain, were all functional with regards to farming and animal husbandry. The large pits that are dug into the natural chalk could have been to collect rainwater, but I think that these pits were traps, to catch the mighty Aurochs, to keep them inside and feed them up, to ready them for the major feasts at Durrington Walls.
Insane.
The Aurochs became extinct in Britain during the Bronze Age, and we know
Insane.
that these enormous animals were in the Stonehenge landscape, and we also know the pits went out of use in the Bronze Age. The Aurochs were a large, powerful animal with horns measuring a metre long, and their shoulders were taller than the largest people of the day. In Britain, they were hunted out of existence, and through time they were getting rarer and rarer. And because we find their bones in the Stonehenge ditch, which some believe is a ceremonial placement, the Aurochs could have
Such professional. Thanks, man. Professional viewer. Professional colleague and friend. Thanks for being here when you're sick too, dude. I appreciate that, man.
I suspect that Aurochs were caught and then kept in these giant pits that circle the enclosure. Inside they were fed and fattened, getting them ready for the next feast before they were slaughtered inside the pit and the meat taken to Durrington Walls. This is my own working hypothesis, but it does seem to fit the evidence.
You guys are making my day.
In a very real way to Durrington Walls and gives them a function that works in Neolithic and Bronze Age context. I'll continue working on this hypothesis and will try and find out more about the archaeology of these pits. And when I know more, I'll report it here on the Ancient Architects channel. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Ancient Architects. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel, please like the video, please leave a comment below. Thank you very much.
In the 1st century CE, in the Valley of Mexico, the greatest city of the Western Hemisphere,
perspective, only a few cities in the world could have been more popular.
Imagine for a moment a brilliant young man with a
This book that I wrote, Aftershock, the Ancient Cataclysm that erased human history.
Okay, here we are at Easter Island. And what you can see from this picture is you obviously see two different construction styles. The stones on the right-hand side are basalt. And they
Nougat, really?
on the left
That's random.
side, you basically have rubble as fill.
Exclusive
So this
products?
is
Wow.
consistent with one
That's cool, man.
and one level of technology. It seems more like that the stones on the right-hand side were made by an advanced culture with high technology.
Yeah, dude, I bet,
Something
man.
happened on Easter Island, some cataclysmic, catastrophic event. And then later on, another culture came. And that later culture we call the Polynesians. They likely arrived around 1000 AD, and they did not have steel technology or even bronze technology. They were literally a Stone Age people. So the only tools they had to work with were stone tools working on stone. And when we look at the map of where Easter Island is,
Oh, insane. There was a buffalo poutine.
south of the equator,
I didn't know what it was.
more than 2,000 miles away from any other landmass,
That's insane, dude.
as in 2,000 miles away from the coast of South America. So very, very isolated. And most academics will tell you it was uninhabited until the arrival of the Polynesians around 1,000 years ago. Here's its basic shape, 5 miles by 7 miles by 10 miles. So tiny, almost like a speck of land in the middle of the Pacific. So Easter Island is located.
Let's go get carne
one
asada
of the most
fries.
isolated
Oh,
islands of
snap.
the world.
Before the game, hell
The
yeah, man.
closest major landmass
Sweet.
would be South America, and that's at least 2,000
sounds amazing,
miles to
dude.
the east. And the basic dimensions are 5 miles by 7 miles by 10 miles. So it's almost like a speck in the Great Pacific Ocean. And yet we find
Yo, thanks for being here, man.
sculptures,
Go
human-like
Vegas.
sculptures,
Good luck, Vegas.
constructed on the island, more than 900 of them. So the question is,
You think it's comparable? Oh, yeah, for sure.
and how were they made?
You can get like smoked meat poutine here and stuff, and like steak poutine.
As you can see from this slide,
Yeah, carne asada, that'd be
you see
insane.
almost perfect cutting and fitting of stone. Again, this is not something that the
Hell yeah, man.
Polynesian people could have done, because the only technology they had was stone upon stone.
Steak poutine, yeah, really.
So this hints that there was
Yo,
once
what's up,
a
Christian? How you
lot
doing, man?
ancient high technology involved in construction on Easter Island. And then we have this
My
wall
boy Christian's here.
at a location called Vinapoo,
What's up, man?
and this stone is basalt. So it is 7 out of 10 on the hardness
Oh, that's
scale,
nice of you, man.
with diamond being 10. And there are no basalt quarries located on the island, but there are underwater off the coast. So who was
Deep
swimming
tahini? I don't
around
know, man.
underwater, cutting big blocks of
I don't
stone
know.
like this, moving it
Where does
onto
tahini
the
come from? It
land,
comes from
and then constructing this
something.
wall? It's more likely, as we know from previous videos, that 12,000 years ago, the oceans of the world were 300 feet or 100 meters lower than they are today. And so the basalt quarries would have been exposed at that time. And if this is the case, then this wall could be 12,000 years old, made 11,000 years before the Polynesians ever existed on this little island.
True, sesame, true,
Again,
true,
you see
true.
the detail. This is
I'm good, man.
incredible
How about you, dude?
precision, very similar to what we find in places like Peru and Bolivia and ancient Egypt and other locations. And once again, it shows that there were two distinct civilizations. Standard academics say only the Polynesians lived here, but we see that advanced people were here long, long before them.
Today's your day off? Nice, man. Congrats, buddy.
The level of precision
Congrats, man.
of the surfaces and the joinery. And here, even polygonal shapes similar to what we see in the highlands of Peru at Cusco. Three-dimensional shapes interlocking with each other. That was a glitch, sorry. And once again, this is also at Vinapu. This is basalt stone, very
Cool, man.
hard,
Happy to see you, man.
and the stones fit together almost perfectly, but a very high level of technical prowess. And even when we look on the corner, we can see here it's three-dimensional interlocking of stone. Below, we see basically rubble, and on the left-hand side, more rubble. And then this. This material is not basalt, it's called volcanic tuff, and it's actually quite soft. So this is something that if the Polynesians had, say, basalt pounders or basalt chisels, they could shape a head like this without too much difficulty. And so this is what we're looking at when we're looking at the Polynesian period of construction on Easter Island. And here's one of the, it's called a moai. These figures, human figures are called moai. And you see this one in the middle of the picture. It's made of volcanic tuff. It has fallen over, and it's in the nature of 6 to 10 feet high. So not that large, not that difficult in terms of hardness to create. So this would be a Polynesian project. Compared to that, this, do it again. So here is the fallen moai. So that's a human figure made of relatively soft volcanic tuff. And then compare that with this wall at Vinapu. Very tight-fitting, almost three-dimensional interlocking. So you have this crossover. It's like the same thing we find again in other locations like Peru, Bolivia, Egypt, Lebanon, etc. You have the technology that we think of in terms of the famous cultures of the areas, and then you have anomalies, and especially in a photo like this one. This is one of the moai figures on the left, made out of volcanic tuff, and on the right, the harder basalt construction is almost perfect. So there's a tendency that the famous cultures we know of, such as the Polynesian Easter Island people, they found the island and they found out that somebody had been there before them. Somebody who had made incredible structures and things. And out of reverence, they would build their own ceremonial site in the same location. We find that in Peru. The Inca people found the city of Cusco about 1,000 years ago in ruins. It was a megalithic city made of up to 1 million tons of basalt stone. But something had destroyed the city. And so out of reverence, they decided to build their ceremonial places in the same location, either on the side or on top. So in the case of this photograph, you see one of the moai figures on the left, very close to the older megalithic wall. And the same is the case in locations such as Machu Picchu, the famous Inca construction. 5% of Machu Picchu was found by the Inca, megalithic in nature, and then they built their ceremonial city around the work of a far more advanced people. And once more, Vinapoo. There are 4 or 5 locations that we found on Easter Island that could not have been constructed by the Polynesian people, but we do find the evidence of Polynesian work in the same location. Quite often, the Polynesian work is much more extensive, but never as finely done. And finally, here is a video. Unfortunately, this was done about 5 years ago, so it's not a stabilized camera, but I mainly wanted to show you this because it shows you the tight-fitting nature of this wall at Vinapoo. So it's not simply that there's one join between 2 stones that's fine and then the rest is kind of sloppy. It's all of a very refined nature. And the amount of erosion on the surface indicates several thousand years since it was originally constructed. So this is the new evidence that's coming out in different locations on the Earth. The evidence of very advanced engineering and technology in quite famous locations. But academia is still slow to catch up on what some of us independent researchers are finding out. And the good thing is that we go to these locations often with an engineer and or a geologist. So they give us indications outside of the field of archaeology of the profoundness of the nature of some of these amazing creations. There are even sculptures that portray people with beards and mustaches. And so Polynesian people, if they're pure-blooded Polynesian, the same thing in South America, the native people, they tend to have 0 facial hair. So this could indicate that there were people living on Easter Island in the distant past that had facial hair, and that indicates that they were not Polynesian whatsoever, but came from a different location. There is also a large crater lake located on Easter Island, and in this crater lake we find totora reed, which is a reed used for making boats and roofs and things like that. It's quite light, quite spongy, quite waterproof. And another location where we find this totora reed is on the coast of Peru. So what I'm hinting at is that the totora reed might have been brought by ancient Peruvian people to Easter Island before the time of the Polynesians' arrival. A very useful plant. If you had people moving back and forth from the coast of Peru, where totora reed is very abundant, to a place like Easter Island, not as a destination but as a transit point, then it does make sense to plant some of this reed in the lake so that as you're transiting from the coast of Peru to Easter Island, then perhaps to Tahiti, Hawaii, and beyond, if you had to repair your boats on your way back to Peru, your material is located right there on Easter Island. We also have other relationships that we're starting to figure out in terms of when Van Roggeveen, who was the Dutch explorer, who was the first European to land on Easter Island, his observation of the people was, he said, I saw dark-skinned people, I saw light-skinned people, I saw black-haired people, I saw red-haired people, and I saw blonde-haired people. Now this does not describe the basic attributes of Polynesians. Pure-blooded Polynesians have a very strong tendency of having dark skin and black hair. And so this tells us that Easter Island was a place where different cultures visited throughout the centuries and in fact millennia. And so some little islands are located off of Easter Island, and this is where the famous bird ceremony happened, or the Birdman ceremony. And so this was something done during Polynesian times. The first warrior or great person to be able to swim out to the islands and collect the first egg of a specific bird and bring it back would become the ruler of the island for a year. And these are the constructions located where the ceremony would take place on the main part of the island. Now, compared to Vinapoo that we saw before, you see this is simply stone stacked on top of each other. They didn't even use mortar or clay or any kind of adhesive. It's simple, dry stacking. So that obviously is not an example of lost ancient high technology. That's a relatively technically primitive people who are building with the materials and the technology they have on hand and through their experience. And here again, the doorway going in, you have to go on your hands and knees to enter, but it's simply stone stacked on top of stone. And here again, another example of that. These pieces of stone are maybe 2 pounds up to 10 pounds in weight, so they could be built relatively rapidly and from the stone from the area. And then here we have carvings. Again, these carvings were done during the time of the Polynesians. This was a celebration of the Birdman celebration or cult. And they are numerous in this one area of the island because this is where the Birdman celebration took place. Very Polynesian in nature, similar to what we see in Tahiti, which is where the Easter Island people originally came from, and we see similar stuff in Hawaii as well. So this is Polynesian design and culture and expression. And again, very simple dry stacking of stone. And quite a crude carving, once again done in the Polynesian style. If you had basalt tools like chisels and hammers, you could create that shape out of a softer volcanic tough stone. Technically not very difficult whatsoever. But then this is where we enter the anomalies. Here in the Great Quarry on Easter Island, it's kind of hard to see, but if you look in the lower area, you'll see a face looking upwards in that recessed area, and that is a stone figure that would be about 40 feet tall. So compared to what we've seen before, the work by the Polynesian people, this is on quite an amazing scale. Carving straight out of the bedrock to create giant stone figures. So I don't think that you can say that the work we've seen before and the work we're looking at now was done by the same people, and especially by the fact that more than 900 of them were created from a time period of about 1000 AD to somewhere in the region of 1750 AD. And they're so numerous. Almost every single one of them faces inland, which is quite curious. And the local people say that they were made as guardians and that each one represents an ancient chief of Easter Island. And by the way, the traditional name is Rapa Nui, which means Big Rapa. And I don't think that's a reference to the size of the island now, but knowledge of the fact that in distant times, the island was much bigger when the ocean level was 300 feet below. And it is quite possible that when the Polynesian people arrived, that there were remnants of the earlier population living there that had an oral tradition and history of much more ancient and knowledge and times of this little island. So this shows us that, in fact, there are two different designs of these moai. In this case, you have a person with what is called an aquiline nose. So you see it's very angular, very European looking, whereas Polynesian people tend to have somewhat flattened noses. And also the possible appearance of a goatee or beard. And once again, Polynesian people, if they're full-blooded, tend to have zero facial hair, or if there is some, it's just a little bit of stubble. Nothing that could make a mass like a goatee like that. And as well, we have other sites, like this is called Tongariki, and notice that one of them is wearing a red hat of some kind. And what we're starting to learn is that that likely is not a red hat or depiction of a hat, it's a depiction of the original people who may have had genetically red hair. Also, we find structures like this with holes that in some places look like they were done with drills. Now, once again, this stone is basalt and it's very hard, so you would need at least steel level technology to be able to do this kind of work. And here again, another example. In fact, on the left, there's evidence that that was a tube drill, which is something that was not really invented to carve into hard stone like this until the late 19th century AD. The civilization on Easter Island more or less collapsed around the 1770s, because I believe it was in the 1720s that Van Roggeveen was the first European to visit Easter Island, and by the time of Captain Cook's arrival in the 1770s or 1780s, disease, accidentally brought in by the Europeans, had basically wiped out that civilization. So the whole culture from the 1780s onwards actually went downhill. And this just shows you a little video of the drill holes. Only located, especially there, you see those are almost perfectly circular. And only located at a few sites on the island. So in the foreground we see again the volcanic tuff carving, so quite soft. The figure in total would be about 8 feet tall. Reasonably easy to have been made by the Polynesian people. And then these much larger figures. Some of these are made out of volcanic tuff, and other ones are made out of basalt. And once again, on some level, you can see some of them have kind of flat noses.
Military financial advisor, man, that's a great idea. I actually
especially the section from the left.
applied for a job like that, where the clients are just the military, but I don't think I was chosen. I have to follow up. But usually I applied with job, and then the recruiter's really excited, and then they send it to the hiring, and then like the hiring immediately just rejects me. And it just sucks.
Because if everyone was homogeneous,
it's fucked, man.
You wouldn't know what someone with an aquiline nose would look like.
Now, what if I just fucking join the military?
Here we have the temple complex, and this work here.
I was rejected from being a bus driver, man, in the city of Ottawa.
Stones and smaller stones.
I applied to be a cleaner that cleans houses and people's toilets and shit. I wasn't chosen.
This is a creation by the Polynesian people. Not that complicated to do in terms of technology or resource acquisition.
That's a great idea, the financial advisor, yeah.
Some of them 15 plus feet tall. The quarry is at least 5 miles away.
Can't do any drill though. Or you just stand around and do the lane movements in a squadron. I can't do that shit.
This location, because what would they use as rollers? There are no hard, large wooden trees located on the island. The largest trees they had were a kind of palm tree, but the material was so soft that trying to put something that would weigh 10 or 15 tons on top of log rollers
dude.
Squish the material underneath. And once
interesting,
again,
man. Thanks, man.
Where you can see some quite tight-fitting stonework in contrast
Holy shit.
to the rougher work of the complex that we saw previously. And at another location, this is Anakena Beach. Once again, we see the figures with the top knots. And
hard job to get here.
To this day, who wear their hair like that. It's actually traditional
great,
Polynesian
sure.
to do that, especially for women with long hair.
Yeah, man, bus driver, dude.
and heat and humidity.
It sucks though, because they were hiring a lot, and I met the HR person, went to the hiring fair. The HR people were happy to see me just because I guess I was a receptive person. Some of the bus driver people showed up weren't very people person-y,
because you don't
say the least.
find anything like this anywhere in Polynesia except Easter Island.
But it's fucked, man.
And the
Shit's so
general
fucked right now.
idea is that the Easter Island people migrated from Tahiti
Help
about
desk for an
1,000
airline.
years ago.
Cool, man.
So Tahiti is thought to be the homeland of the Polynesian people.
Wow,
That
insane.
includes the Maori people of New Zealand, the Hawaiians, and the Easter Islanders.
Help desk support
And this
technician.
is the back. And what's kind of curious is here, once again, you don't find one simple building style. We see recycling of material. And that
I'm writing
doesn't
that
make
down.
sense
Help desk
if you only have
support
one culture
technician.
involved. Because in general, a temple would be built and then expanded and expanded and expanded. Another one would be built, another one and another one. But in the construction of this back wall,
But I mean, I'm
see
certain
that
the
ahead has been
military
recycled.
has the vaccine
Here,
mandates. I'm
to
quite
rise,
sure.
The erosion is very heavy, so this could be from another time period.
Miami-Dade College offered almost 2K
And more evidence
a year.
of this hard basalt construction with holes that are almost perfectly
Cool, man.
circular
That'd be good for you to get like
and
placement.
likely involved
I would do a
some
program
kind
if
of
they
level of
provide
technology.
placement.
And this is a close-up of that. Almost perfectly
Yeah, man. The financial advising thing, it's
basalt tools, basalt trying to
takes
cut
time. I mean,
basalt.
it's
You would
they want me to
basically
talk to my
have a
friends and
situation
shit,
where the tool
and I
would
don't
wear
really
down
want
as
to do
fast
that.
as the material you're cutting. Because what we find
Like I
anywhere
don't
on
see
the
my
planet
career
is
from
the tool
my friends and
has
family.
to be a material harder than the material you're cutting. So basalt does
Yeah,
not cut
here, dude. It's
basalt
here. It's still a
very
religion, man.
efficiently. Basalt cuts volcanic tuff.
Here,
quite
it's
efficiently,
fucking
but
Canada. It's
the
fucked, man.
Polynesian people
Canada's so
did
fucked.
not have any kind of
Maybe
metal
just-
technology.
Maybe I do want
whatsoever.
need to
That's
teach
what
English
we find
overseas somewhere.
in
You know what I mean?
Polynesia in general, up until contact with the Europeans.
I'm really considering that, teaching English overseas.
They brought with them from Europe the knowledge of iron and the knowledge of steel. And that's why iron and steel were great trade products.
I don't know, man. The Uber Eats, it's my car. I need to replace the brake lines, so I'm really reconsidering whether I'm going to do that or not.
To be from pre-contact times.
I thought I was going to get the bus driver job.
Here again, at another temple complex, very tight-fitting stone in basalt. So as I said earlier, there are at least 3 or 4 locations where we find stone-on-stone contact utilizing basalt, which is not found on the island, but is presently found underwater, likely somewhere in the region of 50 or 100 feet deep. So it's most likely that the basalt was harvested in pre-
No masks, yeah.
when the ocean
The
level
one guy that does
was
that,
lower than it is today.
what, the help desk? Sorry, I can't remember. Can't remember what I was talking about.
12,000 years ago. And once again,
Sorry, man, I
shows
can't
the back
remember
of
what we were just talking about.
of one of the Moai figures. If you look just to the right-hand side, again you see that flat piece of stone with the holes drilled in.
Oh, teach English. Yeah, teach English.
Recycled
I understand.
from an older structure. Once again, distinguishing the pre-Polynesian work from the Polynesian work. And the Polynesians likely, when they found a
Uber
ruined
Eats.
megalithic temple,
Are you talking about Uber Eats?
builders,
When you get rich, won't forget about me? Aw, thanks, man. Likewise with you too, man. And Ninja, Toad.
incorporate that into their structure. It makes more sense to harvest
Oh, Canada's
what's
fucked,
available
yeah.
than having to go to a quarry and cut out a new piece.
What do you think, Toad? Do you think I should join the military? There's a job fair tomorrow.
Close-up
Commissionaires. I applied to be a commissionaire. I didn't get call back.
with the drill hole.
That's like a fancy security guard.
And again, another location where we have the top knots. They're from a very specific quarry located on the island. Where
It's crazy, man.
red, hard volcanic material that is very high.
The job fairs are just so useless.
And so
They do nothing. They throw the job fair just to say that they threw a job fair.
But there are still people who live
Only if you're not gonna be in the front lines.
who wear their hair in this manner. It's the Polynesian
Yeah.
tradition.
I mean, I don't really necessarily trust them. They're totally gonna be like, hey, let's get in this bus to go to the war museum, and then they bust us out to the airport, and they're like, yeah, jump in the C-130,
There are people
and then next thing you know, you're in fucking
who be descended from an older race of
Ukraine.
people who were pre-Polynesian. We hear stories about this in Hawaii, that when the Tahitian people first arrived in Hawaii, there were
That's what I mean. I mean, so much worse could come out of potential goodness. There's too much risk, man. And I'm not passionate about it at all.
So this man, either he's a mix of Polynesian and European descent, or it could be that he
But,
had genetics.
I mean, in this new communist
Back to the time when you had
fucking dictatorship,
So that's
where else are you gonna get money?
tradition of
Either you're going woke or you're going military,
people
or police,
general
or security, like TSA,
had the long ears who
right? Like, what else? How fucking else are you gonna make money in this world?
along with the red hair that people came from at least two different
Fucked.
locations. One possibly more intelligent or sophisticated in some ways than another, and probably an older civilization. So they would have been the ruling class, and then you would have had the working class. And you find that once again in many cultures. In the case of Peru, you have
Well, didn't they
the
didn't they
royal
fire a couple snipers, Canadian snipers that were
the Inca were not
Trudeau's bodyguard snipers
they were the noble
due to the injection discrimination?
population who did most
I'm quite certain they did. I remember a few interviews of the sniper. If I Google Canadian sniper fired vaccine mandate,
of the land, did farm.
he's gone open about it.
And so this is simply the landscape that we see.
And Canada, like, fucking,
There used to be forests.
it's insane. It's so insane.
Different exotic trees, but unfortunately now, with the introduction by the Europeans in the 18th century,
The used car market is so shit. I really might just fix the lines, the brake lines,
basically
and keep that car for a while.
defoliated in terms of diversity.
But that's like a month's work
But that's what happened.
of work
Now they're starting
to pay for the repairs. The quote.
But originally, it was
It'd be a
probably
month's work of Uber Eats.
and now it's quite dependent on shipments of foreign food. Here's a short video.
The goal was to get the bus driver job. Like, I'm fucked.
And this is a view of the actual outside of the quarry. And you can see the huge number of these carved moai figures located there. Highly unlikely with a population of somewhere in the region of 5,000 people that they could create 900 of these over the course of time, given their limitations in terms of technology. And there you can see an unfinished moai in the center of the screen, and we'll see photographs of other ones that were never completed. But it's the sheer scale and abundance of these works that are very, very puzzling to me. And so these are, again, located on the outside of the quarry. And most people simply think that they are heads.
What do you mean?
and necks.
What do you mean by that,
So
dude?
what we're going to see is that these are in fact full figures.
Oh, with the bus driver, yeah.
So
Oh,
you
yeah.
can see, again, one of them with an aquiline looking nose,
People are real assholes to bus drivers.
possibly the representation.
And then you gotta drive their ass around.
But some people distinguish this look from the quote unquote.
I realized I would never be able to be an Uber driver.
And here again,
Person of people? Holy fuck. There's no fucking way. They would backseat drive so much and I would
people with more
not
certain noses than with this design.
allow that.
These are the ones that date back to pre-Polynesian Polynesians arrived, they created many more of them, but on a much smaller scale. The big ones are the ones with the aquiline noses. And there is one that's more than 40 feet tall.
Yeah, I bet.
Then we look in the quarry, and you can see there, you can see that one is
Now the way things, yeah.
this way,
There was a questionnaire.
over.
So I got rejected after the questionnaire. One of the questions was, the gentleman says he lost his wallet and wants to come on without paying. What do you do? A, let him on, knowing he may not pay tomorrow. B, tell him everybody needs to pay their fare equally. And I chose B. But in real life, I'd probably just let him on. Maybe that's why I was fired. Who knows? Not fired, but not chosen.
And here again, more of them. And what we're going to see in upcoming pictures is that excavations were done starting in the 1950s, and that shows that each and every one of these, unless the head was broken off the neck by falling over or destruction, they go all the way down into the ground. And geologist Robert Schock, who I went to the island with, believes that the soil has actually built up, that these were standing figures, and that the soil built up over the course of time, and he has no problem in believing that some of these could have been constructed 12,000 plus years ago. And just another example of the sheer abundance of these figures. Some fallen down, but those are really quite small ones. And again, this is called Tongariki. And you see the sense of scale and the size of the figures, and just the beautiful landscape of Easter Island. Now this is curious because most people believe that this sailing ship design was done by the native people after contact. In the 18th century, when the Europeans arrived, most archaeologists believe that this is something that the Easter Islanders did to record the arrival of the Europeans, but that may not be the case. Another one of the giant figures, face looking
Armed
upwards,
forces.
unfinished in the quarry. This one is in the region of 40 to 50 feet long. It would be very difficult.
They don't even call it the military. They call it
And again, notice
the Canadian Armed Forces. That just implies war.
unfortunately eroded.
I work for the Canadian Armed Forces. That's terrible. It's a terrible name.
And the quarry, again, many of the moai have been cut out of this stone and moved. There's evidence that there was once a road that went all the way around the island.
Sounds like a corporation.
Located about a meter underground. And so those slabs of stone, again, are believed to have been made of basalt. And basalt is
What if you don't want to be I mean, like, I like arms, but what if I don't want to be armed? Working.
they actually started to uncover the road, and supposedly
Would I just be a
some,
Canadian Forces?
local people decided to pry up the stones and take them for use in house construction. And so the government decided to cover it back up again. So we have no idea what is hiding underneath the surface of Easter Island. Once again, the classic look. Ones with the aquiline shaped nose. And there's a smaller one that's fallen down. So this is likely from the Polynesian period, and the other ones are from the older period. And again, we see that in other locations on the planet. We see where lost ancient high technology existed, massive sculptures and structures were made, and then those that inherited the land were not able to work on the same scale, but they wanted to mimic the style that they found. And here, just the basic landscape. In the case of this one, this is of the Polynesian period, made of volcanic tuff, and it's so heavily eroded over the course of just a few hundred years That's why it indicates that the more aquiline-nosed looking ones are older because they're made of a harder material. So it's more likely that the Polynesians used the softer stone or the softest stone that they could find because that was relatively easy for them to shape, whereas the hard stone ones they could not make. And this is at a curious spot called Abu Te Pito Kura, which basically means the navel of the world. And according to local experts and local indigenous people, the 5 stones found in that center, the large one in the center and the 4 that are around it, are not found on Easter Island whatsoever, and their original location is unknown. So whether they were brought from Tahiti originally, or whether they were brought from another part of the world, is up to question. But also this area has magnetic anomalies which are inherent in the land, but no one knows what is creating that force. You can literally, at one point, turn off your car engine, and your car will coast down the hill, and then coast back up and over the next hill. So that's just an energetic anomaly located on the island, and it could be that in ancient times, that is how the giant stones were moved. The Polynesian people talk about a thing called mana, which is spiritual energy or life force, and they insist that the moai figures were not pulled or dragged along the ground, but were actually moved using spiritual forces. So again, this gives you another map of the island, and that's the location of the magnetic anomaly on the northern coast. Now these 7 figures are interesting in that they more or less have somewhat flattened noses. They're not very tall, and they're the only 7 out of more than 900 figures that face the ocean. All the others face inland. These 7 face the ocean. They are in fact facing west, and they are called the navigators, and they are looking towards Tahiti, which is the homeland of the Polynesian people of Easter Island. So again, these are smaller figures with somewhat flattened noses, so these are representations of the Polynesian people and their ancestors. Why the other ones are facing inland is still unknown. And the location of this is called Ahu Akivi. And this in more detail. You see not the fine detail where these are made out of the volcanic tuff material, so they're actually eroding quite quickly. You see the rough nature of the material itself, and so these are the works of the Polynesian people. We also have this, which is called Rongo Rongo, and it's a glyph system that is only found on Easter Island. You don't find it on Tahiti or Hawaii or any other part of Polynesia, and there's some indications that this script actually comes from the Indus Valley, as in India area, because there's a very similar type of script located there. So the complexity of the history of Easter Island could indicate, again, that it was a focal point or a place of transit for many different cultures over the course of thousands of years, including people visiting and possibly populating from the Indus Valley. Only 25 or so examples of this Rongo Rongo still exist, and nobody on the island knows how to translate it. It's quite possible that it's so ancient that they never knew what it meant. But it was an inheritance from one of the much older civilizations. This is simply quite a bizarre figure. No one knows what it represents. In some ways it looks like it has an elongated head. There is a tradition on the island that people with elongated heads lived there in pre-Polynesian times. That lives up to this very day. And so that, again, could be very much a genetic difference between the first inhabitants of Easter Island and the later Polynesian people. Because this is more of a depiction of the actual Polynesian people. So contrast this with that. Also, we do know that during Polynesian times, the Moai figures had eyes. The eye socket was made out of a red stone, and then the other area of the eye is coral. So they originally had eyes that were looking up towards the heavens. And that's a feature where after contact with Europeans, there was a lot of troubles, internal battling that happened on Easter Island. Many of the smaller ones were tumbled over, and all those that did have these eyes were damaged. So this is a reconstruction. And again, another example of the Rongo script, which you do not find in any other part of Polynesia. So we were fortunate to meet the mayor of Easter Island, and we brought with us a representation of an elongated skull of the Paracas people of the coast of Peru. The Paracas people are one of my main subjects of study, and genetically we're finding out that they had elongated skulls that were natural, as in they were born that way. They had lighter colored skin, and they had genetically red hair. And so when we brought this to her and presented it to her, she said, oh, the ancient people also looked like that. So that could be very much a connection between Easter Island and the coast of Peru. A few years ago, you will all have heard of the Kon-Tiki expedition by Thor Heyerdahl. And a couple of years ago, I believe his grandson did a recreation of sailing across the Pacific on Kon-Tiki 2. And so rather than Thor Heyerdahl, where he simply wanted to see where Kon-Tiki would go, the people of Kon-Tiki 2, because they had GPS, decided to try to navigate directly from the coast of Peru to Easter Island, and they were successful in a little over a month. So that shows that in pre-European times, contact between Easter Island and the coast of Peru was possible. And that enters into the whole realm also of complex racial mixing before the time of the European contact. The possibility also that those that did the very lost ancient high technology work in the highlands of Peru, like around Cusco, were the same people or related people who did the work on Easter Island. And here we see the first excavations in the 1950s by Thor Heyerdahl. So you see they dug down and they found a full body in the 1950s. Almost every single one of those Moai are also buried up to their necks. And according to geologists like Dr. Robert Schock, they believe that's the result of erosion on the island and the buildup of soil. There's a lot of rainfall on Easter Island, so you'll get lots of sloughing off of soil over the course of hundreds, if not thousands of years. So this could be an indication that the earliest constructions on Easter Island are 12,000 plus years old. And poor Thor Heyerdahl, he was not a member of academia. He strongly believed that there was migration of people across the Pacific in ancient times. One of the key things he focused on was the red hair that you find evident in ancient Peru, and also possible evidence on Easter Island. The Easter Islanders also have a tendency, or an ancient tradition, to say that the most ancient ancestors came from where the sun rises, or actually, sorry, from where the sun sets, or sun rises, actually both. So that means that people could have gone to Easter Island either from the west or from the east or from both. And these are current excavations going on Easter Island. See, buried up to their nose in some cases.
Yo, Dick, I know you got the Rona, and I know you just moved into the heroic drive back, but did you set up the power tower yet?
Open to the public, but from what I've been told,
Just wondering.
they're still excavating to this very day, and finding more and more evidence of underground buried things. And here once again, and here again. And here, this is actually the one that has the sailing ship. So you see, that is evidence, because of the buildup of soil, that could be a ship that actually arrived before the time of Van Roggeveen or other known Europeans. So it could be a very complex history on Easter Island, a little tiny place located at least 2,000 miles from any major landmass. Definitely
No way, that sucks, man.
more stuff.
Dang, that must have been a pain for you to... You probably realized you probably should have just taken it apart right at the beginning. It probably would have been easier. Sorry, man.
They make these little boats for one person out of the Tortora Reef. And on Easter Island, these are called a pora, whereas on the coast of Peru, they still make these to this very day, and they're called a tora. So the similarity in the name, you simply exchange the P for a T, could be a linguistic link between the two locations. And when we look here at a moai that was never completed, you see it's still attached to the bedrock. The idea that that was done using a hand tool such as that is highly unlikely. Those are more like tool marks that you see at ancient megalithic places on Egypt. So it could be an indication, actually, some cataclysmic event that happened before European and even Polynesian contact, that maybe there was some kind of cataclysmic event that happened on Easter Island, maybe at this event, or a series of events that happened about 12,000 years ago. And finally, an aerial view shows you the number of massive...
Dang, dude. It'll be nice soon, though, I bet.
Completed. These again are 20, 30, and even 40 feet in scale. The stone is relatively hard, so I believe that these are remnants of the first culture, and I believe these are remnants of lost ancient high technology.
Oh wow, it's over, insane.
Okay, thank you very much. Julian, can we just dim the side lights, please, if you can hear me? So thanks very much for coming to our fourth Origins conference. We've been doing this for a good few years now. Obviously, this came from the Questing conference combined with the conference I'm organising called Megalithomania, which we do in Glastonbury every May. Obviously, I'm 100% obsessed by megaliths, but I've also realised that I am Olmec as well, because this is a t-shirt and a hashtag that you should use a lot if you do anything Olmec. A lot of people say I look like an Olmec, which is I take as a compliment nowadays. I didn't before, but I do now, so it's all okay. So the Olmec are a really interesting culture. I've been to Mexico 3 or 4 times, spent a total of about 8 months there exploring the different cultures there, but the one that really grabbed my attention from very early times, back in 2003, was this culture. And, these were a culture that was there before the Maya, long before the Maya. They go back at least to 1800 BC, although there's evidence that goes back even further in Guatemala. Now, not many people have even, I mean, to anyone here not heard of the Olmec at all? You've got absolutely, oh, you're all really wised up. Very good, all of you. But here's just some of the things we're going to get through today. There's some really early evidence which is kind of like anomalous, which we're going to have a look at briefly. The origins of the Olmecs, about where they could have come from. And we have to sort of look at them as the first temple builders in Mexico and that part of the world, and it certainly wasn't the Mayans. And even the famous Mayan calendar, the long count, the Zolkin, and all the other counts that they used were developed and originated by the Olmec, not by the Maya. There's very interesting artifacts with some interesting clues. There's some epi-Olmec script that looks like it comes from other countries around the world. But the main theory is that they're either African or Chinese or potentially even Polynesian. And they don't look Native American or Native Mexican, really. That is the one thing about this culture that has caused a lot of controversy. There's also linked with that is the mystery of Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent, who was one of the great gods of ancient Mexico. And he goes way back, even to the time of the Olmec. There's also elongated skulls and cranial deformation throughout Mexico in many different cultures. And even giant skeletons, which if we have time, we'll have a look at a few examples, but they were probably later than the Olmec. So this is the area we're going to look at here. So it's this area here around, so it's this area around here, around the Gulf Coast. Obviously you've got North America up there. This is the Yucatan, the famous Mayan area, obviously called Guatemala and Belize. But this area here is really where it's all happening when you're looking at the Olmec culture. La Venta, San Lorenzo, Tres Zapotes are the 3 main sites. But there's evidence that they spread out around Mexico City to a site called Chalcatzingo and a few others, and also down into southern Guatemala, and also into Honduras, and even possibly down to Costa Rica, where the stone spheres have been noted. Here is just some of these are all the official Olmec heads. 17 of these that have been discovered throughout the Olmec world. 2 at Tres Zapotes, 3 at La Venta, 10 at San Lorenzo, 1 at La Cobota, and there's another one which has come from a sort of obscure place. The earliest date is 1800 BC, but it really peaked around 1200 BC in this part of Mexico at La Venta. And they came from the Tuxtlas Mountains, and they're at least 60 miles away. Some of these heads are 40 tons. The heaviest one is 40 tons. They range from about 18 tons to about 40 tons, and they're very hard type of volcanic basalt, most of them. They vary in rock style sometimes, but they're various different forms of basalt. The interesting thing about them as well, which kind of grabs me, is that some of them were used as another monument, then carved into an Olmec head, which we'll look at in more detail about that later. And there's even examples of Olmec heads at a place called Cholula, near Puebla, in Mexico City, and even all the way down in southern Guatemala, probably of a slightly later date. This is the strange head. This was recorded back in the 1930s, and this has caused a huge amount of controversy because apparently it's been destroyed. It's no longer witness this. But they think now it might have been a relatively modern carving. But you've probably seen images of this. David Hatcher-Childress and other researchers have had this on in their books and on their websites. So this is just one other strange head. But we're going to look at some other ones that are probably later Olmec or influenced by the Olmec in different parts of the country. Again, so we're going to start really just around. So we're going to start again around this area, around Tres Zapotes up here. This isn't the oldest site. The oldest site really is San Lorenzo, but the first real discoveries and excavations took place near or around Tres Zapotes. The first Olmec cave was discovered in 1862, and it was kind of ignored. It was recorded. People knew about it, but everyone thought it was just some Mayan carving and left it at that. It wasn't until 1905 that German archaeologist Edward Seller noted it again and recorded the same head discovered at Tres Zapotes. And this is when the kind of name Olmec really started being used, because it was an old Aztec term which kind of translates as people of the rubber, because they created and produced rubber in that area along the Gulf Coast and the trees there. And even in the highlands around Mexico City, there was talk of a lost culture, and that was often linked to Quetzalcoatl, a strange race of people that used to rule different parts of Central America. So again, here are some of the people involved in the discoveries. Jose Melgar in 1862, he was the guy who first noted it. He was astonished, and he, I quote, was astonished that the Ethiopic type represented. I reflected that there had undoubtedly been Negroes in this country, and this had been the first epoch of the world. So the first person to see the first Olmec head immediately referred to them as not looking like they're from native Central American. And then in 1925, Franz Blom and Oliver Lafarge discovered La Venta and some other sites in the area, and they believed it was just an outpost of the Maya. In 1927, Herman Bayer was an anthropologist. He believed the Olmec of the Totonac civilization, and this is where they really got stuck with the name Olmec. It's kind of unfortunate. It's like the way that the Druids got linked to Stonehenge, and the name Olmec got stuck with this culture, where no one really knows who they were called, even though we have one idea which I'll share with you a little bit later. Marshall Saville, he was the head of the American Museum of the American Indian in New York in 1929. His name was again used by George C. Valiant in the late 1920s. He did explorations in the area, and again that name got used once more. So these are just some of the people involved here. This is George Valiant here, rather dashing fellow. And Tres Zapotes, this is one site I've been to twice. I had a good look around it. The last time we went there, we managed to actually go to the site itself, which is now a series of mounds a couple of miles south of the small town. Now, it takes you've really got to know what you're doing to get to places in the Olmec world, because it's often raining, and there's often mud everywhere, swamps and things like this, so you've got to take the right road at the right time of year, or you'll get stuck quite easily. This is Matthew Sterling, who died in 1975. He was one of the head archaeologists at the Smithsonian. Not only was he involved in actual some giant reports, which we feature in our book, but he was the man who really popularised and uncovered much of the Olmec world we see today. Even back in 1918, he had suspicions that there was some culture there. He'd seen various photos from Tres Zapotes, artifacts and strange script that came from the Gulf Coast area. And literally on his first 2 days of excavating at Tres Zapotes in 1939, he uncovered this. This is what's called Stella C, and this is actually him investigating it when it was still buried in the ground. And this is really interesting because this actually has some Mayan glyphs that represent the calendar, the long count calendar. And they eventually, when they found the top part, they eventually realised it dated to 31 BC. And it's not that old, it's a very, very latest part of the Olmec. This is when they were probably dying out completely. But it is relevant because it's much earlier than any Mayan calendar. It was carved from basalt. On the other side, we have this strange looking figure, which is some kind of weird jaguar face here, which is a motif they use throughout the Olmec world. And also this guy looks like sort of He-Man, his chest here, quite excited look on his face. But this is the oldest Mesoamerican long count calendar on Earth at the time. And they think it was September the 3rd, 31 BC, or 32 BC, they're not too sure, because it all depends on a couple of factors. This is a close-up of what it looks like. This is actually in the Mexico National Museum now. And this is what it looks like in the museum now. And it wasn't until 1969, I mean, they contended it was 31 BC back in 1939, but it wasn't until 1969 they actually found the second part and actually confirmed that day, and they were correct in their assumptions leading up to that. And this is a very important aspect, because this discovery suddenly rewrote the history of the Americans completely, because the Olmecs weren't known about. They've been rumoured about, but they were not known about. All the Mayanists, all the academics were very upset because they dedicated their careers to the Maya being the mother civilization. But other calendar systems had been, or numbers had been carved on other sites. This is the place called Chiapa di Corzo, and several years later, this one was discovered, and it was 36 BC is the date they found it. I'm not going to get into all the numbers here. I did a whole load of research with the brilliant Jeff Stray, who's really looked into the calendars and number systems of the ancient Maya. And but we found other evidence as well that could date these even older, but I'm going to get into that right now. And this is just when they first discovered it. They were all rather happy. And what they did some dating at Tres Zapotes, and they got a date of around 1000 BC. And this was like after San Lorenzo was in decline. Tres Zapotes kind of rose up around that time, and La Venta rose up around that time as well. But the dating is not being fully investigated. There could be much earlier dating. They really haven't done that much in the Olmec world even today. This is actually 1939. This photo was taken on my birthday. I wasn't alive in 1939, but on my birthday in 1939. This is Matthew Sterling and his team actually just hanging out at Tres Zapotes, obviously having a tea break. This is what it looks like now. It's the sign outside. They've got some big murals and things like this. You don't actually go to the site officially. You only go to the little site museum where some of the artifacts are on display. But we persuaded, sort of harassed really, the museum curator and gave him some cash to take us to the actual mounds and pyramids that you can go and see. No one goes there. And we went there. We got photos. Next time I'm going back there in December, I'm going to take my drone and get some aerial shots of it. This is a very interesting piece. I'm just going to show you some lots and lots of stone artifacts. This is a massive basalt piece of rock. It's probably about 5 foot wide. Very strange. You tap it, it's got acoustic qualities. It looks like these bits here on the end, they're kind of, it's almost like they're knocked together to create like a bell sound. How they did this, how they carved this, brought it 60 kilometers from the Tuxtla Mountains, is a mystery. This is one of the Olmec heads. This is the first one that was discovered there that we saw images of. It's on display actually at Tres Zapotes. The other one is on display at a nearby town, Santiago Tuxtla. This is a map of the site. Can't really see can't really work out what's going on there really. But here's a better image of it. This just shows you kind of aerial shot borrowed from credit to Ken Garrett, who took this shot. And as us exploring it, we were highly excited, being, considering I am Olmec, and all the megalithomaniacs. And I was there with Brian Forrester and 15 other people. And we didn't even know you were allowed to get into the site, but we got permission and we did it. And it's just some photos of some of the mounds. There's not too much to look at, but we were discovering bits of pottery and other such things in the ground as we walked around. It has not been fully excavated. Here's one of the more elongated structures, which is just one part of the site. Here's who lives there now, these guys. They're going to protect the site. Again, you can see the sort of step pyramid shape. And they really were the first people, apparently, in Central America to build these kind of structures. Even though there is in North America, we have the Mount Cobb sites at Poverty Point, Watson Drake, and other such places in the southern part, just on the other side of the Gulf Coast, which do date much earlier. But they are strangely very familiar, very similar design. We found this while we were there. This is just part of a pot probably, but I found this interesting because it's very similar to what we saw in the museum at Santiago Tuxtla, which is the nearby town. Also at the nearby town, this is the small museum, which is on the way to Tres Zapotes really. This is the 40-ton. This is the biggest head. This is the latest one. Probably dates to around 400 BC, and it's huge. It's got his eyes are closed. It's a slightly different design. He does not look really that happy. And this shows the size of it here. Also in this museum, this wasn't found at first. This was a place called La Cabota, which is right up on the mountains where some of the stone came from. So they think this was carved. It wasn't moved back into place and never actually ended up at Tresipotes or whatever site it was destined for. And here we have these unusual chaps. Look at these. Very almost like West African looking features. Almost like with an afro haircut as well, which has been commented on by various researchers, including the brilliant Ivan van Sertima and other people. And again, we can see that here. And this has caused a lot of controversy, this huge controversy in Central America, because it does suggest that it was not entirely built by native people. There was a sort of cosmopolitan culture, and we'll see it wasn't only potentially Africans, it was also Chinese and even Europeans or people from the Middle East. It gets crazy when you get into it. This is another angle on the largest Olmec head. It was kind of unfinished, but it looked pretty good to me. But the strange thing is the eyes are closed. This could represent the end of the Olmec era. This is what some people say. It was actually the end of the era, and this is why they represent it as closing down that culture, integrating into the Maya. This one was found at Tresipotes, although it's on display at Santiago Tuxtlan. You've got a picture of the mounds in the background. It has these 7 braids on the back. Which is one of the strongest arguments for African origins, because this is one of the traditions. It's found in Ethiopia, for instance, and in other parts of West Africa. This braided hair with 7 of them, which is like a symbolic number for them. So this is what Ivan van Sertima kind of really sort of jumped at when he realised you have obvious things like this. And I just want to show you this. This is an illustration of the Cabota, the huge one. I just like this. I think this dude is awesome. Whoever these people were, they were awesome. Look at them. And then we have these things. We have like shells, relief carvings of shells, really hard bits of andesite and granite. It's incredible. This is just some photos I took when I was there. And this is like the kind of thing that sort of slides into the base of the temple, the base of the pyramid, with the face coming out kind of face like that. And this is, we find this at other places like in Peru and different cultures, but they were certainly mounds, and they were built in a certain way with certain materials. You had these stone things around the base of them. There's another one here. And this is really where Ivan van Sertima really did his thing. He wrote the classic book, They Came Before Columbus, back in the mid-70s. And even in the Popol Vuh, which is the sacred book of the Quiché Maya, they claim that this unusual culture, came on ships of bark, and it almost means that black Africans sailed across the Atlantic Ocean long before Columbus and integrated and developed and worked with the local people there. And these are just some examples, comparing it to Nuba Chief of Kenya. And this is all from his book, and this is like obviously an Egyptian thing here. And this was found, it's actually was on display at the New York Museum. And again, it just shows you the features that he used in his case. And Ivan van Sertima, he's a legendary gentleman, really. Died in 2009, he's a Guyanese-born professor of Africana Studies at Rutgers University of the United States. And he really became famous when he started talking about the Olmecs. But he quoted, "A study of the Olmec civilization reveals elements that so closely parallel ritual traits and techniques in the Egypto-Nubian world of the same period that it's difficult to maintain that all these are due to mere coincidence." And this is certainly the case. We'll look at more examples later. But I just wanted to get to San Lorenzo and get to some of these sites. Now, officially, the earliest dating of San Lorenzo is 1500 BC. However, it is dating up on this high plateau, which is a couple of miles from the river, which is comes in from the sea up at Cocos. They have got dating going to 1800 BC, which is why that's the earliest date of the Olmec. They've got dating that also goes to about 5000 BC. So there was settlements there, but no megalithic construction going back that far. He just shows you Matthew Sterling. Again, he was the main discoverer of San Lorenzo. He actually got a tip-off from a local upriver when he was working at Levanter. Upriver, there was this site that they found some massive megaliths at, similar to the ones being found at Levanter, Potes, and others. And you can see here, this is how they got. They didn't have cars and no roads or anything. They had to go through swamps and rivers on horseback with mosquitoes and bugs, horrible things, snakes chasing after them. Then they had to camp there, persuade the locals to feed them and all this kind of stuff. So it was a hell of a job. And this is, quickly they found this. This is one of the first heads they found. This is Matthew Sterling, one of these guys. This is one of the 10 Olmec heads, colossal heads found at San Lorenzo. While he was there, he found 15 monuments in total, and these are all on display now at Jalapa Museum. In 1964, famous archaeologist Michael Coe continued the excavation. This is where the 1200 BC dates, carbon dates, came from. 10th head, there was 9 heads discovered up until 1994, but this one was discovered then thanks to a magnetometer survey of San Lorenzo. It's found by Anne Cyphers, and it's a beautiful head. It's like really precision carved, and it somehow maintained its shape and without any chips or damage. A lot of them got deliberately damaged, and they were buried in the ground. This is how most of them were found. This one didn't get damaged somehow. All the other ones did slightly get damaged. So this is quite an interesting discovery in itself. It could have been placed and buried before the Vandals, whoever they were at the end of the Olmec era, actually did that. And it's just some interesting, this is just some of the dating I was looking up a couple of years ago. And you get some strange dates popping out of San Lorenzo. Obviously this could be natural things they're finding as well, but we see this number 2260 BC. So we're looking at before 1800 or 1500 BC. And these are the more standard dates we're finding all over San Lorenzo. This one really stood out to me. Too old, perhaps some asphalt lumps present. Sure exactly what that meant, but this is maybe there wasn't asphalt lumps present, and it could be that old indeed, because at a couple of sites in Guatemala we do find that exact date in some of the sites there. It's just some of the massive blocks we find at San Lorenzo. You can see like these little striations and sort of scoops out of this massive bit of basalt here. This is a technique we see in other cultures around the world. And these just kind of holiday snaps of San Lorenzo. We have sort of relief carvings. They even have, close to spears, bird motifs. We have this kind of mutilated baby's head on the left here. A huge black volcanic piece of rock, which was actually in the middle of the San Lorenzo site. And also these strange kind of scoops and carvings throughout. We have this chap here. Doesn't look happy. It's not really an Olmec head, but he has got a beard, which is unusual, which could represent Quetzalcoatl, who's always depicted with a beard. And this is just one of the mounds that there's nothing you can go to. You can go to the San Lorenzo site. Again, it's like Tres Photos. You're not supposed to go there. No one goes there. But we bribed the guy again. We went there with our little group, and there's not much to see, but it's just interesting to sort of get into the land where these Olmecs were living, because I am Olmec. So there was water coursing throughout this site. This is one of the sort of technologies that they worked with. They had 21 man-made lakes were up on the hill where the main plateau where San Lorenzo was based. And they were lined with repellent bentonite rocks. It's water-repellent rocks, so to like keep the water flowing quickly. There's also 14 natural springs at the base, all around the base of San Lorenzo. And when they discovered these, it really kind of made the archaeologists realise this was an advanced culture. And they moved literally hundreds of tons of basalt. They carved it into these pieces here. It's like just a flat stone on top with a shape like this underneath it. So the water would move through, and they were lined with bentonite clay. So this was a technology. They were like pushing the water down, and this would create electric charge. Now this is just a classic thing. People like John Berg, Philip Callahan, and other researchers that have put this together and realised they could have been doing this to create electric charge. And then when you look at the layering, the types of clay and rock, pebbles they were using, they were all either magnetic or electrically conductive. So they were working with these energies, and there's a lot of evidence to kind of suggest that. And also the rock they used often had a high metal content, which would make it electrically conducted. There's a hat there just to show you the side. This just shows you one of the side channels during the excavation. And the charge, according to John Burke, who did scientific tests of this site, he said it would gather at the top of the hill, and this is where you place all your seeds and grains, and it would guarantee that they were strong and they were abundant, and you would get higher yields and a better quality crop. This is something that other cultures around the world have used as well. Also, linked with this energy is this was discovered there. Now this is an iron ore magnet, which worked as a compass. And this is potentially the earliest one in the entire world, before probably 500 to 800 years before the Chinese even invented it. We'll come on to them later because they may have been here as well. They also had concave, circular kind of mirrors made of certain types of rock, certain types of iron ore, which they'd often wear around here, almost like reflectors. And also what they found with this particular compass is that it always, when you were working with it, always oriented 8 degrees off north. And this is quite interesting because this is taking the ground when that was where the magnetic pole was, because it moves obviously millennia and so forth. But a lot of their sites are aligned 8 degrees off north, so they were using these to align their sites. You know, and so that was their north. They kind of worked with that as their north. There's astronomical alignment to even match that as well, which Andrew goes into in his book, The Cygnus Mystery. So I find this quite interesting because if this is the case, and there's evidence that the Chinese came here later, they may have nicked the idea from the Olmec, taken it back to China, and they're the ones who got in the history books, which is a little bit annoying for them, I would imagine. What's also interesting is that this is a place in southern Guatemala. These are like sort of Buddha figures, but these are potentially the later Olmec as they were migrating south looking for jade, which was their prized material. It wasn't gold, it was jade. And these, on the right-hand side here, the temples, the magnetic north orientation is actually right in their temple. It's almost like the rock was carved around the most magnetic hotspot and placed in the temple here. So they knew what was going on, they knew how to find it in the rock, and they knew how to find the magnetism, and this could have been part of their kind of whole process. This could also be the same for the Olmec heads as well. 4 of these heads here, which were found at a site called Monte Alto, which is now in the central plaza of the village, the town La Democracia. I went there in 2004. Have this effect with them, so it's very intriguing. I find it very interesting. And there are other examples like this, and they're certainly not by chance. You would not have the magnetic pole in the same place in 4 statues by chance. And so they were working with the magnetism long before anyone else was. So this is some of the Olmec heads, the colossal heads from San Lorenzo. This is Monument 1. This is about 1200 BC. It's one of the oldest ones. This is Head 2. This is what they call it. This is in the National Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City. It's not actually in Jalapa Museum where most of them are. This one is in the Jalapa Museum. This is Monument 3. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but you can actually see these cut marks. This is where they were probably deliberately damaged at the end of their life, and then they were buried. These were all on display. They were all on display at the sites originally, and then they were buried at the end. And what some researchers are now thinking is that in fact they were buried because the elite people who were sort of guaranteed them good agriculture, healthy crops and things like this had probably disappeared or migrated or died off, and they were like in a desperate situation to try and kind of bring that back because they were losing all their wealth. And they were a very, very wealthy civilization, probably because they knew how to grow food with these secret techniques that they were using. This is Monument 4. Again, this is in Jalapa Museum. This one is Monument 5. We're going to keep doing this until we get to number 10. It's like a countdown, really, isn't it? This is in Jalapa. This one here is in the Mexico Anthropology Museum. It's one of the finest ones, actually. You can see the beautiful carving. It's incredible. Yeah, and this one is in the Jalapa Museum. This is in Jalapa Museum. This is number 7. And this one is the only smiling one. Yeah. Oh. And this is the final one that was discovered back in 1994, thanks to the paleontologist. survey. This is really quite beautiful, this one. But this is actually at the San Lorenzo Museum site, so you have to go there yourself. And these are all 17 Olmec counts. There you go. There's other stonework in San Lorenzo, which is absolutely fascinating still. We have these crouched figures with like Egyptian headdresses. We have these very unusual kind of anamorph carvings here. We have these altars, which you find in most of the Olmec sites, huge altars, with like this emerging kind of shaman priest figure coming out from the earth into reality. And we have these more from San Lorenzo. This one really intrigued me because this is kind of like two kind of dwarf Olmec figures holding up the sky. We find this motif, it's like the Atlantean motif in Egypt and other places. This is from a site called Throw in the Weber. So it's a much smaller site, but still the carving's very interesting. This is on display at Halapa Museum as well, but I wanted to show you this because this is one of Ivan van Sertimo's comparisons here. And we do find, we're going to go to La Venta next, but first I wanted to show you, which is here, you can see all these other sites, these yellow sites are all sites. The red ones, there's nothing left of them really. But that's where the big Olmec 40-ton one came from. And this is Trisakotez. Yeah, now this was found, this is a very interesting piece. This was found not actually in an Olmec site, this was found in the Tuxtla Mountains near Majura on Mahura. It's nephrite jade, discovered in 1902 in the state of Veracruz. 75 glyphs of Epi-Olmec, or Isthmian script, which is the whole area. It has a long count date on it again, done 162 AD, but the type of writing is not at all in Central America. It's very strange. It's been compared in Shang Dynasty Chinese, which we'll look at in more detail shortly. This was also found near La Venta, a site called San Andreas. This is one of the earliest forms of writing again. And this is, when this was discovered in 2002, this really surpassed Trisakotez. And this has got a date going back to 650 BC. It also has a 3 Ahawa, which is a recognisable day on the Zolkin calendar. So there's suggestions that this may have been, you know, sort of almost like a smoking gun that most certainly the Olmecs developed the calendar. This is the date that the Olmec were in the later part of their time, they were still around in this area. In the area as well, there's been some very early discoveries. They were growing maize or corn back in 3100 BC, and also there's pollen evidence from 2600 BC, and they were domesticating sunflower seeds in 650 BC, so we know that they were working in agriculture, and therefore probably a calendar that is linked with agriculture way back at that time. And we know that the long count calendar, which ended on December the 21st, 2012, began in August 3113 BC, or 114 BC, depending on which version you look at. And so this is the time when we knew they were growing, had agriculture in place back then. So there could be a reason they dated it back to that time. There's a lot of speculation about that. So La Venta, this is really the kind of my favourite. This is pretty amazing, this site. This is, not only is it the only surviving site you can allow to visit, you buy a ticket, it's got an on-site museum. It's been thoroughly excavated, quite badly destroyed actually by Matthew Sterling and his team, unfortunately. And they kind of rebuilt it for the tourists. And all the statues here and artifacts were taken to a place in Villa Hermosa, the nearby city in La Venta Park, which you can go and visit. And all the original, there's about 80 pieces on display there. You can see there's a huge mound here, so like potentially a seven-fluted sided pyramid here. This whole complex here with all these layers of serpentine with multiple layers buried in the ground. There was over 1,000 tons of serpentine pieces buried in layers as well. No one knows what this was for, but remember, serpentine is electrically conductive, has magnetic properties. It's just a wheel figure that was found at La Venta, suggesting they had knowledge of the wheel back in at least 1200 BC, although they only used it for toys. And obviously you have these kind of features again. So this is an absolutely amazing place. It's in an island in the middle of the Tanala River. And this is, and it's kind of raised up on a plateau with a very slow moving river either side of it. And this is actually part of the coastal Caucasus River. Coastal Caucasus means serpent sanctuary, which is quite an interesting name in itself. This is probably the earliest pyramid in Mesoamerica, but we've got one we're going to look at later which could prove that isn't the case. It's a huge 100,000 cubic meters of earth, slightly conical. They think it could have been more, it could have been a step pyramid. Some recent research has been carried out by the archaeologist Rebecca Gonzalez. It's never been excavated, the pyramid itself, so there could be stuff in there still. But a magnetometer survey in 1967 found an anomaly high on the south side of the pyramid. So there could be something in there. It could literally be a magnetic anomaly. Because this is actually built upon a magnetic hotspot, a zone of magnetism. Also, this is one of the things that John Burke discovered, it's a gravitational hotspot, so there's fluctuations because of like potentially a meteorite hit in the area. He just shows you some of the, this is the pyramid from the other side, and he's just, these are all replicas, all of these are unfortunately, but they've all been protected and saved in Hermosa. And this just shows you, so this area here is the most interesting. There used to be lots of basalt columns, these ones here. And this is the Olmec heads, they have them facing into the complex. Actually, they were facing out, they were facing north originally, so they got them the wrong way around. There's thousands of these basalt columns all over the Olmec world. And these must have been brought up from the river or the sea. So this is the only place this kind of volcanic basalt would form into these shapes, like we see at Giant's Causeway and even Gunung Padang and now Nadolig, Micronesia. Which just shows you some ones that are on display in the local museum. Amazing stelae here, brilliant carvings on them. Again, we have the water features. Again, so they were working with the water, potentially not just for the water available, but for the energy that this can help produce. This is Levanter Monument 1. It was first described by Franz Blum and Oliver Lafarge back in 1925. These are all on display now, the originals, remember, at Levanter Park in Villa Hermosa. Hey, another one. And we have this is Monument 3 from Levanter. And you can see like the ear spools here, they're quite amazing, these strange helmets that they wear. This is Matthew Sterling at Monument 4 from Levanter, and this again is on display there. You can see some of the beautiful stonework here. Almost looks like the Sphinx face, doesn't it? It's incredible. And this is an unfinished Olmec head. This is sort of the way they were working with the stone. This is volcanic basalt. It's extremely hard stone, but it kind of gives a clue as to how they did it, which is a very difficult job in itself. Here's some other discoveries that were made at Levanter just in the last 10 years. Now these are potentially 2 more Olmec heads. These have been so badly weathered and damaged, people are unsure if these are even that. This is Matthew Sterling, who, and he when he went to the site in 1940, it was kind of protected by Don Sebastian Torres, who was an 80-year-old native Indian at the area, and he kind of grew his food on the site and allowed Matthew Sterling and his group to stay. And there was a very strange story. There was a story that the ghost of the Aztec Emperor Montezuma would sing and dance in the ruins. What that means, I don't know, but that was one of the stories and legends. Here's one of the amazing altars. They're kind of holding a rope down here. It goes round to the side and joins up with the arm of a woman. Shows you, sort of see these serpents here. It's 4 serpents coming in, different angles. It's also, get that here as well, you kind of get the weird jaguar head there. Crowned figure emerging, holding a rope or serpent against the ground. The meaning of this is just no one really has a clue. There's no written evidence of what they're up to. This is a goddess or female figure, about 8 foot high. And then we have these images of these kind of cleft skulls here. But this is a sign, potentially, of cranial deformation, which is something that they were doing in the world. And this is kind of like a figure with all these flying gentlemen all around him. You can't really see it clearly. holding some kind of mace. This is a tradition you find in China as well, holding maces as a sort of sign of prestige. These are the tombs that were found. In the higher levels of Laventa, which weren't really found so much too deep. So these were probably the later part of the site, probably around 600 to 400 BC. Here's what they look like in at the Laventa Park. And his flying figure with kind of helmet on, it's very strange. I'm not sure what this is. He's a bearded figure. We also have this guy who's bearded with the kind of hook nose. Clearly, you know, he looks very, very different. Doesn't look Olmec, of course. It's almost like he's from the Middle East or somewhere, Phoenician. And also we have this very strange image here. This really gets me. This is sort of confused a lot of people, but it's like this gentleman holding his bag. He's got some kind of apparatus or a beard. He's surrounded by like a serpent with plumes. So this is potentially the first ever depiction of Quetzalcoatl, or the plumed serpent. This bag thing has come up over and over again. Some of the grave handbooks with man bags. And you find examples at Göbekli Tepe, Sumeria, obviously Laventa. This is actually from Western Africa, this one. So this is interesting because this links with potentially where these people may have come from. This is what Ivan van Sertima suggests is certainly the case. We also have this chap. This is monument number 13. This is what they think, they call him, for some reason they call him the ambassador or the traveller, because he's got Phoenician footwear, headgear, carrying some kind of side or flag. He's got these symbols. No one has deciphered what these mean whatsoever. But it's certainly very strange. Some people suggest this is this type of clothing and footwear that Etruscans, Hittite or Phoenicians would wear around 1200 BC. These are some of the serpentine pavements which are that have a kind of figure of the face of a weird jaguar. This just shows you some of the serpentine. There was like over 1,000 tons of this at Laventa. This is sort of a nice depiction of how they were doing it. And what they would do, they would make these, they would fill it up with different types of clay. Sorry about this. They would fill it up with different types of clay, and then put another layer on, and fill it over with clay, and then another layer. They would do multiple layers of these and cover them up. So they were like offerings to the sort of earth goddess or something like this, or they had an energetic purpose. Now, serpentine and jade, these were the two prized sort of possessions of the Olmec. Where some of this jade come from is still unclear. There's potentially some found in Guatemala. There's others found further south past El Salvador, going to Costa Rica and Panama. There's another source potentially near Mexico City, which is why they think they spread in these directions, as we'll see later. The serpentine is magnetic, and the qualities of that were noted by explorer Humboldt in 1794. And this is sort of the layers we're talking about here. It's very strange because these are completely buried. No one can't see these from the ground. And this would have been like this during the time of the Olmec. All these different clays and layers of serpentine. 28 courses of stone blocks in olive and blue clay with these sort of weird jaguar faces and a mosaic pavement. There's mirrors placed there, Celt offerings, jade celts, clay fillers, like pink clay. It just went on and on and on. This is what it kind of looked like. These are the layers of serpentine here, and then we have the layers of jade. The mosaics here and here. This is 1,000 tons of serpentine, buried, covered up, forgotten about. So this must have had some use. There's no way they would do that for fun. And bring that amount of rock so far away. There's other piece of the jade here, really beautifully carved. This has got some strange glyphs on it. These have not been deciphered. Then we have these kind of elongated skull figures and these kind of cleft skull figures. These are the famous sort of, you know, we don't really have a name, but these were like found deep, where we just looked, deep within the ground. This is the several feet below the surface. These were found in situ, in this orientation, in this position, with these, and these all have elongated skulls. These date to 1200 BC, and they were strangely, when they excavated, they realised someone had dug back down to this a few years later to check they were still there, and then covered it back up again, back in Olmec times. So it's very, very strange the way they would do that. He just shows you some of the types of skulls, so you can see the elongation here. And these are the kind of Celts behind them, but these gentlemen here, they do not look, they kind of look oriental. There's a sort of suggestion by Ivan van Sertima and other research that they were even Chinese Shang dynasty, which I find particularly interesting, because these kind of cleft skulls and this kind of elongation was found in the Shang dynasty, which is about 1000 BC and a bit older. And even anthropologist Betty Meggers noted that the features that distinguish the Olmec are present in earlier Shang dynasty civilizations in China. So they may have come over and actually influenced to be part of the Olmec culture. She also noted some other similarities, such as the writing style, often carved on jade, the use of batons, we saw that as symbols of rank, the archaeological styles, the mounds, even the pyramids, which we find in China, the feline deities, the weird jaguar, and the cranial deformation, amongst others. And this gentleman is called the Wrestler. He is from a site in Veracruz. Again, he has potentially Chinese features with facial hair. Then we have these very strange kind of babies with no kind of parts, if you know what I mean. But Shang dynasty admirals and ambassadors were often eunuchs. Now, this is another strange coincidence. There's lots of these statues with no parts here. And you can see the elongated skull as well. Another example.
What's up, man?
This is part of the Shang dynasty, is what they kind of did. God, the ancients are wicked, aren't they? Why would they do that? And again, we've just got some comparisons here. This is a Shang dynasty kind of crouching figure with a kind of Mohican. You find almost the exact same thing from Leventa and other crouching, they call it the Quizzo position, something David Hatch-Childers is focused on. And again, we have the almost Egyptian headdress here. Now this mohawk and the kneeling position has been found in other cultures as well, Colombians, Africans, the Mohawk Indians, obviously, of the St. Lawrence River. And in China, this kneeling mohawk thing is associated with magicians or sorcerers. So this is another strange connection that we keep finding. Again, we have the cleft skull. This is something that comes up over and over again with this very strange gentleman. Some kind of hat on or helmet. But on the left here, these are Olmec figures, and on the right, these are Shang dynasty figures with potentially what looks like cleft skulls on both sides. We have this is at Leventa. This is like another example of an elongated skull with a huge kind of moustache or beard. And we do get elongated skulls all over Mexico. The Mayan world, this is, unfortunately, hardly any Olmec bones, skulls are still in existence because of the humid climate. They get eaten up, but these are actually from the area of the Olmec, but later, this is why they got saved and survived. This is actually a giant skull with an elongated skull next to it, which I find quite interesting. But it's the same kind of deformation we find in the Mayan world, we find it in the Shang dynasty, we find it in Peru and Bolivia, we find it all over North America. And the Olmecs, they depicted the different types of cranial deformation they actually do in their artifacts. And so we know what they were up to. And there's proof in later cultures who probably copied them. These are some examples of different parts of Mexico. This is actually on display in Jalapa Museum, the big one on the right here. And on the left, this is an example from Ica in Peru. This strange turtle, not sure why he's there, but and this is a place called Coastal Cocos now. I don't look too happy there because it's windy and cold. This area here is where Quetzalcoatl, famous winged god, winged serpent god, was said to have arrived on a raft of serpents sometime in prehistory. He was a tall gentleman with a beard, robes, long hair, very Jesus style. Most accounts, especially with the Spanish chroniclers, he was depicted as sort of bare-haired, fair, you know, with fair beard and this kind of stuff. But actually, other accounts from the elders of Mexico suggest he was actually more a darker beard, darker hair, and he was even dark skinned. This is some of the depictions describe him. So this could relate to the Olmecs. So it just gets a little bit weird when you start getting into this. This is more like Jesus than Quetzalcoatl, but whatever. And there is some chronicles from different elders in the late classic, late pre-classic through to the early classic period, 400 to 600 BC. There's a link with Teotihuacan which I find really interesting. It kind of arose as a new religious center in the Mexican highland around the time of Christ. And there's links with Quetzalcoatl, even this like coming from the Olmec world. This is a depiction from one of the sites. This is almost like a serpent head with wings and a face coming out of it. And you know, Basil Hendrick in Men Across the Sea book, he was always depicted as black-bearded according to the ancient traditions, and even with his face painted black as well, which is again very strange. And we can see that this is some of the migrations from the Olmec world, probably looking for jade, just exploring different areas. And there's a tradition going way back that this area was called Tamonchan. It wasn't called Olmec land, it wasn't called Olman or anything like this, it was called Tamonchan. This could be the name of the area of the Olmecs that got remembered and passed down through traditions. And it was Father Sahagún during the Spanish conquest who collected this from the elders, and that they arrived on boats in Veracruz. They brought writing, books and painting. They founded a place called Tamonchan. He was elite, created the Book of Days, which is probably the 260-day Tzolk'in calendar, then the Book of the Year, which is the 365-day half calendar, and the Book of Dreams, which is probably their magical incantations. Then they abandoned the area and moved to different places. And there is evidence of this because we know they moved to Chatzacazinga, they moved down to southern Guatemala and Zapa, potentially all the way down to Costa Rica looking for jade. And there's evidence of Olmec type carvings all the way down in these areas. This is a place called El Baal in southern Guatemala. We have similar headdresses here, strange bear type figure with strange glyphs. This is Bilbao with some more relief carving. I'm going to whip through these fairly fast. This again is Bilbao. Think of that's illusions. This is again near Bilbao. More examples here with a kind of Olmec figure with these kind of sunglasses, mushrooms. It's going to be just a holiday stamps now. There we go. This is very interesting. This was found at a site called Monte Alto. These are, again, Olmec type heads with sunglasses on, or some kind of, you know. And again, these are the ones with the magnetism that we saw in the temples. And these are some artifacts of a chap I met when I was actually at one of the sites in southern Guatemala in 2004. And he had some he collected himself over about a 10-year period. He had 200 artifacts. More examples here, sort of Olmec sort of features and styles. This goes to the site near Guatemala City, which dates to 2500 BC. So this has caused a bit of controversy, especially with the heads are made of mushrooms. And again, we have these Olmec features even featured there as well, from a very, very early date. And this site called Abash Takalik, or Takalik Abash, whichever way you want to pronounce it, again has potential Olmec heads. And these have been pretty badly damaged. And they have kind of megalithic chambers there as well. And these date to around about 800 BC. There's a pyramid there. There's this potentially, this is another Olmec type head. Crouching figures again. And even in Belize, we have what looks like a migration going out that way. There's jade pendants that have been found. There's Olmec type stucco. And these are some of the oldest pyramids in Central America. This is a guy I met called Jim who did some exploration in some caves and came across this sort of Olmec seated figure made of wood, which is one of the rarest pieces there is. Again, at Lamanai in Belize, we have stucco faces that have Olmec features. But it goes on and on. I mean, I've got just a few minutes left here, but the migrations go in all directions. It just gets weirder and weirder the more you look into this. But it's this area here, Kazingo, which completely fascinates me. We went here earlier this year with Ryan Forrester and our group. This is basically an outpost of the Olmec. Slightly later, they probably worked with the local cultures. There's huge kind of mountains here. And they built pyramids on the site. Discovered in 1932, and the date goes back to 1500 BC. It could be one of the first places Olmec went after they spread out from the Gulf Coast. And on the walls up in the hills next to it, they have clearly Olmec carvings, which are very similar to the Labenta carvings we see. This was photographed in 1978 before it got damaged. This is called El Rey, they call it, and it shows you again a seated figure within some kind of weather system or some kind of machine with all this strange stuff going on around it as they're controlling the weather somehow. You have these kind of flight, can't really see it, but there's like a flying figure here carved up there. Again, we have more relief carvings in the Olmec style. Absolutely fascinating place, Kazingo. I do recommend going there if you can. I'm going to be heading back there in December just to do a bit more research. It just shows you, this is actually on display in the main museum. This is from Kazingo. And this is around 900 BC, and it really peaked this area around 700 to 500 BC. By then it kind of went into decline. This is another from burial 3. This is actually from the burial they found there, Monument 17 they call it. There's other sites in the area, Zasakadla, 800 to 500 BC, again with Olmec artifacts being discovered. This is a recent photo of some excavations they were doing in this area. Again, this goes from 1200 to 600 BC. Kind of talking about right over here, sort of the area around Mexico City. But one of the most, fascinating places in Mexico is Teotihuacan. This has Olmec influence. People don't realise this. The name Tamonchan actually translates better in the Maya than it does in Aztec, and it becomes land of the bird snake or land of the feathered serpent. So it was a name they were potentially using way back in Olmec times. It also can translate in another dialect to land of the rain of the sky. It's definitely true. It is very rainy in this whole area of the Gulf Coast. But I think one of the most fascinating things is the fact that they arrived at Teotihuacan at the end of their era on the Gulf Coast, and this is one of the traditions that was recorded by the Spanish chroniclers. And they founded and built Teotihuacan.
Told the legend.
Another story says a race of giants were created to build Teotihuacan, which could be the same people as the Olmec. This is the temple of the pyramid of Quetzalcoatl.
I think that day you gifted 20. That was the first 5 I quoted. You gifted 20 that day. That was insane. Thank you, man.
And even, look, this gentleman up here, this jade mask, was actually discovered at Teotihuacan, which has extremely Olmec features. So there could be an influence there. This is me hanging out on the Pyramid of the Moon, looking at the Pyramid of the Sun. And even at sites like Quilco, within the confines of Mexico City, there's some very ancient data here which goes back to Olmec times or even beyond. And there are figurines that have been found there, which again have Olmec features, which you can see in the museum there. And even Cholula, which is the largest pyramid in the world, which is a town called Puebla. It's bigger than any other pyramid anywhere, basically. It's absolutely outrageous. It's ridiculous. They have tunnels in it. It's dedicated to Quetzalcoatl. But they have a strange kind of Olmec head here. Look. What is this doing? Why is that just sitting there, just outside the main steps going up to the pyramid? And the stories go back about, back to the time of Quetzalcoatl, where he was the inspiration for building this. It's absolutely amazing. Very strange carved stones here. and it just goes on and on. You can look at many, many sites in this area, and you can keep finding examples throughout Central America of this. In Monte Alban, this is in Oaxaca. There's another site called Mitla. This is, again, we see these carvings here, and these are famously thought to be Olmec. Now this is about 500 BC, officially should be the end of the Olmec era. Just some more close-ups of this. See some examples. I went here back in 2010. Absolutely fascinating place. Highly recommend it. It's got very high level of astronomy built into the site as well. But it does seem like the Olmecs were based in Oaxaca at the end of their era. Now, one of the most interesting things we're going to sort of finish up just in a couple of minutes is the fact that they migrated south into further south into Central America and even South America. And some of the archaeologists and anthropologists believe they could have even gone all the way down to Costa Rica, because we have this stone spear here from San Lorenzo. There's something like 300 that have been found in Costa Rica around the area of Guajito, Palma. I did go down there myself to take a look, and this would be, if this was the case, this would explain a lot of what was going on. We have the same stories as we came further south, the Quetzalcoatl, these blue serpent gods arriving in various parts of Central and South America. And even, you know, we're looking at the migration routes. This is Africa here from Central America, and this is where the sea, so you can jump on a boat and hit that. You're going to end up in the Gulf Coast. This is something that's been researched by various people, Paul Horizon and others. And there are traditions. There's a place where in Fair Gods and Stone Faces by Constance Irwin, she found some of the skulls she was looking at in Central America, like quite distinct signs of Negroid ancestry in many New World skulls. But even back in 1956, other African type skulls were found, which is very similar to ones we find in West Africa. And even prior, Diego de Landa, who lived in 1524 and 1579, he said, but the most important early destroyer and preserver of knowledge of the Yucatan. Some old men of Yucatan say they heard from their ancestors that this country was peopled by a certain race who came from the east, who God delivered by opening for them 12 roads through the sea. This is back in the mid-1500s, this was quoted as saying. And this from this is Azapa, yes of course. This is down towards the south coast. And this depicts a ship, which some people say is the ship that came over from Africa. And this is a depiction of that. And there's been some serious, you know, archaeological and academic research done on it. And now it's kind of opened up to the idea that the Olmecs were indeed in different parts of the world. We have ideas now from China, the Shang dynasty with the jade and the rituals and other such things. We have evidence that comes from Africa, probably a little bit earlier. There's evidence now from Europe and the Middle East and some of the carvings and some of the iconography. It seems like this was cosmopolitan culture. It's a very strange culture. And although the academics claim they all are local, and they all just look like they're local, they look like loads of different people from different parts of the world. It's really a little bit of a joke nowadays, because people realise fusionism is a reality. People could travel across the sea, and we, you know, we really have to take this seriously. And funnily enough, when we were in Mexico, me and Brian actually thought we met a descendant of the Olmec, not me, this guy. And you can see that the features there are really quite remarkable. And so, you know, there was probably interbreeding between all the different cultures at that time. And I think, you know, we have to take this seriously now and, you know, get over there and take a look for ourselves, because there's much more to be discovered. I'm going to be going over there in December and hopefully in February to do more research, maybe take a small group out there. And I think it connects with a lot of the other cultures we're talking about. And I think the dating could also be a bit earlier than what the academics are claiming as more and more gets discovered. So thank you for listening to me. Now you are all Olmec. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you everyone for being here. I'm signing off now though. Good stream, great stream. We did pretty well today. We did really well. We actually did really well. Thank you for being here. Thank you everybody. Appreciate it. Okay. We may raid with somebody, we may not. We may play GoldenEye later, we may not. I want to. I don't think I'm gonna raid anybody. Sorry. I apologize. Sorry. I think I'm just gonna sign off. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it.